Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar on making P6 easier and faster. Today, although it shows Mary Lynn being the presenter, it's actually Ian Nicholson presenting this morning. Joining me this morning is Sue Hopkins, and Sue will be doing all the driving of the tool. So let's talk a little bit about struggles people have with P6. P6 has been out for over 20 years. It's a great tool, but there's some fundamental problems that people have with the tool, and we hear about them all the time. We've been implementing Primavera since P6 since pretty much day one, and we always hear the same challenges from our customers. So the first one is that people struggle with administering P6. So we have clients who have multiple databases and they need to create users in all of those databases. And moving users and layouts and reports from one database to another is very difficult. In fact, you pretty much have to do everything from scratch every single time. So on top of that, people have trouble cleaning up P6. So after a while, it gets full of junk data from various places, imports, things like that. And people have a really hard time keeping on top of that. And once you start to fall behind, it gets worse and worse and worse. It snowballs. And pretty soon, you've got a system that's such a mess that when you do an upgrade, you end up basically just creating a clean database, moving a couple of projects, and leaving all the old junk behind. Almost like declaring Chapter 11 bankruptcy and then leaving all the bad stuff behind and moving ahead with the new company. So that's not a great solution. So we see that quite a bit. The next thing is people have trouble with having consistent portfolios. And what do I mean by consistent portfolios? Well, one of the things that people ask us a lot when we're dealing with P6 is they want to take all that great information in P6 and they want to put it into some kind of platform that allows people to see what's going on within the schedules. So this could be a data visualization tool like Oracle BI or any of those other business intelligence softwares out there. I mean, the reality is we don't want to end up with managers having to get piles and piles of paper schedules. What we want to do is we want to have targeted, focused reports that people can just go and look at, and if necessary, can drill down into. Now, in order to do that, we have to have some consistency in our coding structures within P6. Now, that's easy when you've got one or two projects, but when you start bringing projects in from other people, or you start getting owner requirements on top of your own requirements, that becomes really difficult. So that's a constant struggle that people have. Now, one of the nice things about P6-Loader is that it will allow you to backfill all of that. So you can go very quickly and add project codes or activity codes and assign them to all the right places to set up and make sure that all those portfolios work properly. We have another tool called P6QA or quality assurance that'll make sure that those codes and things are assigned. But if you need to get them set up in the first place, P6-Loader is a great tool for that. The next thing people struggle with is team engagement. Now, believe it or not, as somebody who has worked with Primavera for 20 years, actually Primavera P3 even before that, for 10 years before that, I'm often surprised by how non-Primavera people feel about the tool. To me, I use it all the time, so it's easy and I kind of know where to go. Even using P6 Web isn't that much of a struggle anymore. So, but when I go to client offices, the clients say, oh, we hate this tool. It's so difficult. There's such a steep learning curve. It's intimidating, and they just don't want to work in it. So what we need to be able to do is to set it up so that those people can still update the schedules, can still work with the data, but don't need to be in the tool itself. Now, the way we can do that is we can selectively extract data out of P6, send it off to people in Excel format, get them to do their updates or changes, whatever they need to do, and then incorporate that back into our master schedule. We can do all of that with P6-Loader. The next challenge people have is developing projects. You know, a lot of times what happens is there's an estimating group that estimates the project, or maybe there's a project plan that's been developed, um, but there's no schedule. And now you've got to take that and you've got to build the schedule. Well, I mean, there are some templates available in P6 and they work reasonably well. Um, but what you really want to do is you want to have a way to very quickly create a project. And with P6-Loader, we can take anything from anywhere, put it into Excel, manipulate it, and load it up and create projects into P6. So, if you've got an estimating tool or an accounting tool or any kind of tool, almost always it will dump data into Excel, maybe through a CSV format. You can then take that, work it, and then load it all up into P6. The final one is data integration. There's nothing more frustrating than having all this great information in Primavera and all this great information in your accounting system, and then having to manually type information from the accounting system into P6 or P6 into the accounting system. And that's true for enterprise asset management systems, cost control systems, estimating systems, all these different systems that are out there need to be able to talk to each other because it's just a complete waste of time and money to get people doing things twice or three times or four times. So P6-Loader is unique in that it allows you to integrate data between systems very easily. So again, we use Excel as our middleware. We can move information from one place to another very quickly and very easily. The other thing that it's very useful for is, let's say you've mocked up an integration and you're happy with it. You've used P6-Loader to kind of do all the testing and all the data flows make sense, and you can mock all that up in P6-Loader prior to actually sitting down and coding an interface program. So again, it lets you do all the scenarios and run all the what ifs and make sure that everything works. One of our large clients in the United States, a big electrical utility, did an integration from their planning system into P6. And what they did is when they came time to do testing, they wanted to reset the P6 database each time they would run a test. So they could run the test, look at the results, make notes about what went well, what went poorly, use P6-Loader to restructure all the data back to where it was, and then they could run another test. So rather than have to go and undo all the things that your test did, you can actually just use P6-Loader to recreate everything back into the start of test scenario. So again, on the testing side, it allows you to reset everything very quickly. So let's talk about how P6-Loader works. Okay, so first of all, different companies have different requirements. Some clients are entirely on-premise. Some clients have P6 on-premise, but maybe they have some components up in the cloud, so they have a hybrid model. Other clients have everything in the cloud. And P6-Loader can accommodate any of those. So P6-Loader works through the Primavera APIs or the Primavera Web Services. So depending on how your Primavera is set up, you can still work with it using P6-Loader. And for those who are using the Primavera SaaS environment, that's the P6 cloud environment, we are certified by Oracle to work with P6 in the cloud. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the technology that P6-Loader uses. So the first thing is, historically, there's been a number of different ways that people have got information in and out of P6. So the first one that came along many, many years ago was called the SDK, the Software Developers Kit. And some people still use that today, although it's no longer supported by Oracle. The problem with the SDK is they kind of or sidestepped security on it. You had to be a global super user in order to be able to run it. So as soon as you actually had access to SDK, you had access to everything in the system. So there was no security built around it. As I mentioned, it's no longer supported. It did allow you to selectively extract or update multiple projects, though, so it was a step in the right direction. However, Primavera kind of lost interest in that. and they replaced it with the APIs and the web services, which are much more difficult for people to work with, which is why P6-Loader takes that, that difficulty and makes it easy for you to work with. So the next thing that Primavera came up with was they came up with this idea of let's build XL imports into P6. Well, that worked pretty well. I mean, it did follow the security in some ways. Um, it only allows you to update the projects that you have access to, but it doesn't let you get to global data. It doesn't it doesn't allow you to update multiple projects at the same time. You can only do one project at a time. So it's fairly limited. Plus, the subject areas for it are limited to activities, resources, I think, and one other thing I can't remember what it is. But it's very limited in what you can do. So then someone came along and said, well, let's manipulate the XCRs. So, excuse me, sorry. So what they did was they took the XCR files that Primavera creates, and they said, okay, well, we'll manipulate those XCR files. Well, there's a big problem with that. And the big problem is that there's no data validation of an XCR when it gets imported into P6. So what happens is when you take an XCR and run it in, Primavera just says, yeah, it's good, and it runs it all in. However, it doesn't check in case you made a mistake. So I'll give you an example of a mistake one of our clients made. Somebody wanted to make an EPS code in one system into a global code in another system. So they took the XCR and they changed the scope of the code from EPS to global. The problem was they spelt the word global incorrectly. And when they imported it, P6 imported it, everything worked fine, except that next time someone tried to log in, the system crashed. And it didn't give any kind of message, it just shut down. And we had to go and figure out what the problem was. It took us about a day to figure out what had happened. Well, what happens is when you load P6, it reads the activity code dictionary. It's one of the first things it does. It found this value it didn't know what to do with, and it just shut down. So very risky to be manipulating XCRs. The other thing is XCRs don't go after global data anyway. They only include project data. So there's no way for you to actually change things like user profiles or layouts or anything like that using an XCR. The other thing is if you screw up your database with importing a bad XCR, Oracle support is not going to touch it. So be warned that that's potentially a problem. So the last thing that came along was P6 came up with XML imports. And that works reasonably well. It does have data validation. It is supported by Oracle, but it has very limited functionality around multiple projects. So if you have, there's import remappings that are available as long as you only do one project at a time. As soon as you do a second project, all those options disappear. So again, it doesn't really fulfill the requirement. And P6-Loader is the only one of these that does all of those things. It lets you load global data or project data. Your security profile in P6 is 100% supported. It validates the data coming in through the APIs and web services. And because you're using web services and APIs, it is fully supported by Oracle. It allows you to selectively extract just the information you want, and you can update as many projects as you would like, and including baselines, by the way. So you can actually extract and update baseline projects as well as regular projects. So there's different subject areas in P6-Loader. We have the global subject area, we have the resources and role subject area, we have the project and activity information area, and then we have a number of utilities that help you manage your system. So a few things that's in P6-Loader. In version 6, we added some items in there to make things easier for people. We added what we call usage sheets, and usage sheets allow you to understand where a calendar or an activity code or a resource is being used, so you can do cleanup. We set it up so you can convert and clean XCR files, so you can read an XCR right into P6-Loader. You can run job services from P6-Loader. We set up all of these different things so that people could have an easier time in managing their system. And I'm not going to go through the whole list here. You'll see a lot of this as we go through. So we also added a few more items in more recently. We added roll down functionality. So you can take codes and calendars and you can actually roll them down. So you can take a global calendar that's in an XCR or, sorry, in your system, take a global calendar and make it a project calendar. Or you can take a global code and make it a project code. We allow you to clean the XCR so you can get rid of the POBS records and the risk type records, which cause all kinds of issues when they're being transferred around through XCRs. We allow you to transfer layouts and reports from one P6 database to another P6 database. So, if you got a report or a layout that works really well for you in one system, one database, and you don't want to have to recreate it and spend hours getting it just perfect, we can just move it for you. All right, so I talked about how the subject areas work. Well, when we extract information from P6, we have global topics, user topics, and project topics. So the idea is we're going to extract information out of P6, we're going to manipulate it, and then we're going to load it back in. I'm not quite sure why I keep getting the same slides. Give me 1 second here. Okay, now when you extract your projects, you can extract one project or you can extract many projects. You can extract a base project and or a baseline project. Um, Baseline updating is one of the things that drives people crazy within P6. So oftentimes, there's a baseline update utility, but it's really kind of flaky and you're never really sure what it's doing. Um, so people tend to shy away from it. So they restore the baseline, they update the baseline, then they make it back into a baseline, which is all very tedious, particularly if you're doing a rebaseline exercise, because it's very easy with P6-Loader to just update the baseline to match whatever changes have been made to the project. You can also extract resource assignments and expense items. When you're happy with it, you can make your changes in Excel. And sometimes what people do is they write macros in Excel to work the data. You can bring information from other systems into Excel, load it all back up, and you're good to go. All right, so let's take a look. That's enough of me talking. Let's take a look. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give control to Sue, and then Sue can walk you through the system. All right, Sue, you should have control.
Okay, let me, thank you, Ian. I'm going to share my screen so that we can take a look at the tool in action. So the first thing I want to visit is some of the administrative items that could be done. This is by no means the only thing, but I like to do a few examples of what you could do administratively with P6-Loader. So in this case, I have a new database that I'm getting ready to spin up. I have an existing database that has a structure in it that's very similar to what I want in my new database. So what I'm going to do is take information from my existing database and I am going to actually load it into, oh, let me get to the right place, to a brand new clean database. And just for ease, so you don't have to wait for me to log in and out of client, my new database I'm going to show you in the web version. So I don't have any OBS structure. I don't have anything really set up at all. But I want to take the EPS and the OBS from that system or that database I just showed you, and I want to load it in so that I can spin up this database fairly quickly and get working in it a lot faster. So let's look at P6-Loader. Now, with P6-Loader, I have the availability of hooking it to several different databases. So just like P6, I can select the database that I want to use, and then I can log in. And you're going to use the same credentials that you would if you were logging into Primavera, which allows P6-Loader to validate what type of security level that user has, and it will adhere to that. So my we have a new user interface that was just released, and it makes it a little bit easier and gives us a little bit more functionality with extracting and uploading and things like that with P6-Loader. So P6-Loader, you first come into the results. So these are ones that have been already run, so to speak. Now, for the first thing I want to do is I want to extract because we're doing that OBS and EPS. So let's take a look at the extraction window. On the extraction window, I have the ability to take a look at all of these modules, and I'm just going to open them up and so you can have a look at what's in there. I've got user information that I can work with. I have global information, and I'm just going to kind of scroll down so you can kind of glance at these. I have roles and resources that I can work with, risk information, and Ian talked about some of those usage sheets that we have available. These are utilities, again, that can tell you what project and how many times a particular piece of data is being used. So this can assist you with your cleanup, especially in P6 itself. I also have project information that I can work with, and you can see that we've also got these baseline options here. And then lastly, we have activity information. So we can go out and we can grab any of these types of things. Now, in conjunction with that, we can also go and pick what information we want to pull out, what project we want to pull out, or many projects. So let's say I go and I start searching and I'm looking at this P6-Loader. So we have a search here and I'm looking at this P6-Loader area here, and maybe I want to bring out, all of the items from a particular EPS, all the projects. Now, maybe I only want to bring out one or two, so I could certainly just select a couple of them, or I can select one. So it's really easy to be able to work with different projects, whether you want to do it one at a time, whether you want to do multiples at a time, what have you. Now, in my case, of course, I want to just look at my OBS and my EPS. I want to bring those out. So I'm going to go and select those two options, and I'm going to then extract that data from that um, database that I showed you earlier. Now, when it's finished, I can download it and it's going to come into Excel for me. Now, in Excel, just a few things. Let me give you kind of the lay of the land, so to speak, on this. In Excel, it's going to bring out the column headers that are associated with each module. So on each module, I'm going to have a separate uh, worksheet for. Now, on the modules, on all of them, there will be some kind of color coding that comes in to assist you with what type of data you're having to deal with here. So when you bring it out, it's going to give you a red background on those columns that are required in 4P6-Loader to work with. In this case, it would be an OBS structure. Now, if I wanted to or needed to rename those, I could use an orangish reddish font colored column to remap this. So if I wanted to rename EAI to Emerald Associates, I could type that in here. It's going to go out and find EAI, and it's actually going to change that for me. Now, with the blue and the gray, these are optional columns. So if you're working with a very large sheet, and some of them do bring out a lot of information, because when you're setting up a project or when you're setting up an activity or a resource, you do have a lot of options to set when you're setting those up. So maybe you just want to deal with just a few of those items. You're not interested with that. You can actually remove these completely from your sheet. You can change the order of it, whatever. It doesn't matter to P6-Loader. The gray or the blue is actually information you can change, edit, load in. And the gray is informational. So you can see that, you've got some modification information here. Now it's going to pop on over to EPS so that you can see that depending on the module, you do have different required fields. So you want to, pay attention to that. P6-Loader will tell you if you don't have the proper field there. So if you happen to delete one and not realize it, it will warn you and say, hey, I can't work with this because you don't have the required fields in there. So in my case here, I want to clean up both the EPS and the OBS structures. Now, in the interest of time, I've already done that here. So we can see that I have my OBS. I'm keeping just about, well, I am keeping everything the way that it came out. However, I discovered upon going through here that I actually want to add a training and a sandbox area in my new database. So I can simply add those two lines in and they'll be set up when I load them into my new database. I can also add in columns that are not necessarily part of P6-Loader's extraction or load. And as long as that header is not recognized by P6-Loader, it will simply just skip it and go over it. So I don't have to remove these. So I've used this, a cleanup column, to create my name and actually just make it all capitals. So I can add uh, some information in, or a column in, or several columns to help me manipulate my data and to help me create what I need to. Now in the EPS area, I have again, added in my two new nodes for my EPS. And I have a lot of other stuff down here that I just am not ready to work with yet. Maybe I want to do it later. So I'm going to leave. I have everything I want to load up at the top. I've cleaned those up. Everything's ready. But I'm going to leave a blank line in between the data I want to load and the data I don't want to load. And that blank line is going to tell P6-Loader to stop at line 23 and don't load anything underneath. So then I can go back, I can rework what I need to on the pieces that I didn't load and load them a little bit later. So let's go ahead and load this up into um, our new database. Now, first of all, I'm going to need to change databases. So I want to select the database here, and it's brand new. So I'm going to be an admin in this, and I'm going to log in. And then I'm going to go to my upload area here on the left. So when I upload, I am essentially just going to select the file that I want to. And let's get to actually right here is where I have that file. And I'm going to tell P6-Loader to upload that. It's going to go back and it's going to show me that it's working. And when it's done, telling me that it was successful. Now, if I go into P6 where I loaded this information, I'm going to see that I have the information that has been loaded on both my EPS and my OBS, and as well as setting that responsible manager that I also created that OBS for. So very quickly you can use something from another database to help you either create or even move information into another database. Now the second administration type of activity I want to show you is a code roll down. And what that is I'll just open a project here. Actually, I actually already have it open. Oh, wrong place. And it's called this roll down project. So if I go into my activities here, I have a mess going on essentially. I don't know if things have been loaded in from an outside source that has messed this up. Maybe I have several users who aren't aware that something was created and created another example of it. But essentially, I have my phase code, which is a global code at this point. Now, this isn't important on a global level for my projects. It actually only pertains to one of the turnaround plants that I'm using. So I'm going to want to push this phase down, actually demote it to an EPS level. Now, you can promote up in Primavera. However, you cannot move codes down. So this is really helpful for that. I also have two equipment codes here. So I've got equipment A and equipment B. However, these are actually the same code, but they've been created in two different levels and two different lists. So what I want to do is I want to combine these without messing up what's been assigned here. And I want to put that also at the EPS because equipment is only, these equipment numbers are only pertinent to this particular plant. Now I have specs A and B, and these are the same thing. They're at the global level. They really don't need to be. They need to be at my project level because they are specific to this project, as well as my work orders. The work orders are specific also. So, what I can use is one of the utilities that we provide with P6-Loader to actually demote these, to push them down in Primavera. So I have my phase code and that is global. I'm just going to say I want to move it down to that EPS level. And so that we can see it a little bit easier that it has rolled down, I'm going to rename it. I wouldn't have to if I didn't want to. Now I'm going to also say what EPS I want it to be associated with. In the way of my equipment, I have my two codes. I'm going to put those at the EPS level, and I'm actually giving them the same name. What that tells P6-Loader is I want to combine these two lists and make them one code. Again, going to tell it where I want, what EPS I want that associated with. Same thing with my specifications. I'm going to push them down to the project level, give them the same name, and it's going to combine those and reassign them in my project. So I'm going to tell it what project it's going with, as well as my work order. I'm going to push down. I'm going to keep it the same name, and I'm going to roll it down to my project level. Now, this last column is saying what does P6-Loader want to do with this particular code when it's done demoting it. Now, when it demotes it, I can choose to not delete the original code. So maybe I want to go in and I want to be sure that every place this is used, it's now been demoted. So I could run those usage sheets and see if I have anywhere else that it is used. I could then demote it if I needed to, or if there's no other place that it's being used, I could simply delete it. And I can do that with P6-Loader also. But in the way of my work order, I know that that is the only place it's going to need to go, and that's the only place it's been used. Therefore, I'm going to delete it. So let's go ahead and load this up with P6-Loader. But first of all, I have to make sure I'm in the correct database. So I'm going to log out. I'm going to select the database that I'm working with, and I'm going to sign in. I'm going to go to my upload area. I'm going to select that code roll down there and upload it. Now, as P6-Loader is actually working and on this file, it's going to give me, some information as it goes, and we'll be able to see this on a different load a little bit easier. But it kind of gives you some messages here telling you what it's doing. Now, if I go back to my P6, this has all been done now. I can refresh my data and I can see that indeed I no longer have those assigned because they've been demoted. So I can go into my columns. I can go to my EPS. There's my new equipment code as well as my new phase code. And at my project level, I have my specs as well as my work order is there now too. So I've added those back in, and I can see that not only have they been demoted, but on those in the cases where I had two different lists, they have been combined and reassigned. And my work order is still there, but at a different level. So these are really handy. We can do this with calendars also. We can demote those calendars. And so it's really great when you're trying to clean up, or if, well, I guess when you're trying to clean up, or let's say you've imported a an XCR or a project from somewhere else, and some of these codes came in at a higher level than you want them to be. You could get them rolled down and just associated with the project itself. So now let's take a look at our uh, user kind of side of the house. I'm going to actually go through a whole load and a lot of a lot of the information that you would create as you had a new project that you were working with. So I have this new project here. And I could have created the project too, but I just like to show you that we do have that we have a project here that's actually empty. And I also have resources that I'm going to need to develop and start working with under this P6-Loader tree. So let's go and look at the P6-Loader file that we would use to get some of this information in. Now, first of all, my WBS. I've gotten this from my estimates group, and so I'm going in and I'm putting some layers in, some hierarchy. I have my codes or my WBS codes or IDs. I also have my hierarchy that I can build in. So I've got some children to my mining, extraction, and upgrader. So I'm able to build those out and also set all of those items that I might want to have in my WBS structure. Now, in creating this particular project, I am needing to create some new codes, activity codes for this. I'm putting them at the project level, and I'm actually going to go in and not only create them, but I am going to populate them too. So I'm going to start building out that dictionary for all of these. So I've got my discipline dictionary that's coming in with my code value and my description. If I need to put hierarchy in, I can certainly do that. So I'm putting in those dictionary values. So I have my WBS. I'm going to start building out my activities. So I've got my activities that I may have gotten from some of my team members, and maybe they were in a a software that they were working in. Maybe they sent them to me in an Excel spreadsheet. I can go in, I can put that information, copy, paste it, put it in here, and start building out my activities. So in this case, I actually have my name that I need to develop for this. And really, when I'm developing my name, I am using several different pieces of information. So what I've done is I have added a column called title, which is I'm putting the title in that I need to have for that. But I'm also going to utilize the area project code that I'm setting, as well as my work package project code. So what I can do here is use the functionality in Excel to build out my name for this. So I'm going to concatenate those three columns and create my name for my activities. So in the way of P6-Loader, P6-Loader will actually take the value that is produced by the formula and use it. So I don't have to copy and paste value back in when I'm using a formula. So I can actually see, I can kind of keep an accounting of what I did to create these pieces of information. So in my case, my name. I'm building out some activity expenses. I'm assigning those and uh, putting in category names, everything I need to for my expense ID, as well as my cost accounts. Now, my cost account is something that I also need to build out. I don't have my cost accounts ready. So I've built out my cost accounts. I've got a tree here that I've started, and I'm putting in some layering, some hierarchy in these for to be used with my new project. I have a few activities that require some steps. Now, in my case, I have a couple of activities that are actually going to be needing uh, the same steps. However, I don't want to retype those all, so I can copy and paste those. I can take my new activity ID and I can set those up again using the functionality in Excel to make my life a little bit easier. P6 Loader can also deal with calendars, which in a lot of cases, sometimes that's not so tough. It's fairly simple to set up a basic calendar in P6. However, in my case, I need this rotating calendar. My commissioning group is going to be working 10 on and 4 off, so a rotating calendar. And that's just going to be a resource calendar. Now, I'm going to set up my uh, basic hours on there to set up my calendar. And then I'm going to set my work time. So my work time is going to be 8 to 5:30, and potentially Sunday through Saturday because it is a rotating. Now on the exceptions, if you've ever had to do something like this on an exception calendar or exceptions on a calendar that are rotating or that occur every so many days or what have you, it it's very easy to misclick, if that's a word, on your days of the week and assign them to an exception. If I miscount, I'm going to have to go back and I'm going to have to start all over again. Now, with P6 Loader, I can use again the functionality with Excel. I can start out with my first day that I would have off, and I can use a formula to then increment my next days. Now I can use the formula again, and I can then create my next set of days off 10 days later. And so I can do that and make it much more accurate and know that I have the proper days and that I have the 10 work days that I am actually working and then my 4 off without having to count and click it within P6 like I would on setting up a calendar. I need to, again, set up a contractor code for my resources. So I'm going to do a resource code called contractor, and I'm going to populate it. Again, I've put in some hierarchy here, and then I'm going to start building out my resources. Now, on my resources, I can uh, assign that new calendar that I just am creating. P6 Loader knows the order in which to load any of these tabs so that you have them done in the proper order that they are successful. So we know, of course, before we can assign a calendar, we have to actually create it. So it knows to create that calendar and then assign it. The same with the codes. Now I'm coming across and I'm going to put in not only some codes that were already existent, but also my contractor code. Um, and I'm also putting some roles and things like that that I already have in P6. Now I'm ready to assign my resources. My resources are going to be assigned both by role and resource ID. And I can even start doing my planning right in P6 Loader or with P6 Loader. So I've got my planned duration, units, planned costs, plan units per time, all ready to go and ready to load. And lastly, I've got my logic, building out my relationships within P6. Now, one thing that if you're working with projects, say you're importing projects from your contractors, and you need to hook those inter-project relationships up every time you import that particular project. Well, what you can do is you can pull out those or extract those ties, those in cross project ties, um, the first time, and then every time you import a new project, you can remove those old relationships and re hook up those relationships with the new projects that you have coming in. So that makes that very easy in this case. In my case, for this one, it's one project. And so I'm just going to do the relationships and the logic through my schedule. So let's go ahead and let's load this up. I'm going to again go to my upload. I'm going to go browse to that file, and I'm going to create all those pieces of information in my or in my database. So here's where the messages are coming across. It's telling you exactly what sheet it's working on, what it's doing, creating, inserting, etc. And then when it's complete, I am able to go over to P6 again, and I'm going to refresh so I can bring that data in. I can see I've got my resources that have been added in. There's that calendar that I've got, as well as over in my activities. I've got everything set and ready to go. There's again my calendar. I've got my durations. I've got my steps. I can see here that have brought in my resources, my roles, cost accounts, my logic, as well as my budgeted costs in units that I have set out and started for my planning. So you can see, really easy. Even if you're getting information from all different types of team members, you can bring that in, you can put it into an Excel sheet quite easily, and then load it in and develop your project. Now, the next thing I want to visit on the user side is working with baselines. So with P6-Loader, as Ian mentioned, you can work with a baseline without having to use the uh, the little tool in P6, which tends to be a little bit flaky. Nor do you have to take that and detach it, do your changes as a project, and then reattach it. We actually can do that straight from P6-Loader without having to do all that. So what I would do is I would bring out my baseline, as well as my project in this case. And in my case, I have some found work that was discovered. So I'm going to actually add in not only to the project, but also the baseline, my found work with no costs or anything like that. And I've also found that I need to redistribute some of my um, costs and units on a couple of my activities. So the way that I can do that is I can pull out that baseline. At the top here, not only am I adding to my project that found work that I have, but I'm also adding it into my baseline so that I can realize that work there. And also in a couple of activities here, I'm going to redistribute some not only labor costs, but also some units. And what I've done here is actually use what I've pulled out. So this was my original planned labor costs that I pulled out from P6-Loader. I extracted that information. Now I know that I need to debit and credit these two. So I've put in the amount that needs to be debited and credited. And I'm coming up with I'm using, of course, a formula to uh, calculate that difference for me. So that's going to be what I actually load back. So I'm going to do my planned labor costs. I've done the same thing with my labor units. So I can go ahead and add these in and move around those costs. I'm going to go back to P6 loader and I'm going to grab that baselining. I'm going to upload that file, go back into P6 and refresh. And now I can see where I have added in that new activity. I've even put a different code in it so I know that it's added work. And I've got my couple of redistributions, and I do not like it when P6 does that here. And I have my other group here. So you can work with those and get them, you can redistribute and for your baselines and work with your baselines with anything that you need to manipulate in those without having to go through a big hassle of disconnecting, reconnecting, etc. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is updating projects. Now, with our interface that we have, we can actually go in and we can extract and we can pick and choose what we want to extract out on our sheet. So if I don't need all the pieces and parts of a that come out with my extraction, all those columns and things like that, I can actually decide which columns I want to bring out. And not only can I do that, but I can also save it as a definition so I can keep it for later. So in my case, I have some people that I need to have update and I need them to status my project. So I've already gotten these templates ready for me. So I've got my project template. I'm going to select it and I'm going to load that. Now, what I've done here is I've actually gone and there are certain things I want to bring out with my project as well as my activity. So I'm just going to take a look at my activity and what I'm bringing out with my activity. Now I've moved everything over to the left-hand side here, and I've only selected those columns that I want to keep or that I want to pull out of P6 with P6-Loader. And I've saved these in. I also am going to just select a couple of projects that I want to, because I'm going to deal with, in fact, I'm going to go back and show you. Let's open up the two projects I want to update. So I've got these two projects and I want to update and get progress on these projects. Really simple projects, and I'm going to get those. Let me change my layout too. And I'm going to get some information in on those. So I could do this. I could set up my template to say I want to pull these out, and then I can go and select my projects that I want to bring that information out with. And then I can, oh, I'm not scrolling very well here. Oh, I don't know what happened. Let me go back. Let's try this extraction again. That for some reason I am not able to scroll. All right. Let's see if we leave and go back. There we go. All right. So I've got my two that are selected, and I can tell by this minus sign. And then I can extract. So extracting out for those two projects. Now, when I download this, it's going to bring in exactly what I asked it to bring in. It's not going to include every single piece of information that can be extracted. It's only bringing out what I want to be extracted. So I've got my activities that have come out. I've got my status, my percent complete, and this is what I want my users to update. So I've put plan start here so that they could copy and paste it if everything goes as planned into my actual start and things like that. So I've sent, I can send this out. I could, if I wanted to bring out, all the activities and just narrow it down to a particular group, I could then use the functionality of Excel to bring those out, to just filter those to what I need and then send those pieces off. So what I've done is actually gonna I've gotten it back, sent it out. I've gotten this my information back, and now I've got actual starts, my status, my percent completes that my team members have provided for me on that sheet that I sent out to them and sent it back. Now, another thing I want to show while we're updating is first of all, I'm going to update my data date.
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
And then I'm going to um, do some bucket, put some actuals in different buckets. So I have my earthworks as well as on this activity in two different time periods. And I have all of these on my in June for this other activity. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to upload this so that I can update my project based on information that others have given me. And going to refresh. My updates are in. And if I go down into those spreads, I can see that I've got units updated within my different buckets. Now I can plan this way too. So if you do any kind of bucket planning, financial planning within particular financial periods, you can also do it in the same respect. So that is just a small piece of what P6-Loader can do. And with that, I'm going to hand it back quickly, I guess. Went a little long. I apologize for that. I'm going to hand it back to Ian so that he can wrap things up.
Thanks, Sue. Let me just go back to my material. All right, so we get a lot of great feedback from our customers about P6-Loader. And as you can see from what Sue was showing here, there's a lot of clients who use it for a number of different things. Everyone has different pains with P6, and P6-Loader is a great tool for addressing most of those pains. The ones that I really like are the ones like on the one on the bottom of the screen that said we finally got P6-Loader. I love it and wish we did this 2 years ago. This is from a client I spent 2 years trying to convince to buy P6-Loader. So, again, really useful tool, really powerful, and a great way to make P6 easier and faster for your team. So just a couple quick case studies, some of the clients we have that use the tool. We have clients all over the world using the tool. It's been a big success. We have clients that are fairly small, like people that are companies that are 1 or 2 people, all the way up to giant electrical utilities. And we can help people with implementation of the tool and training and everything else. So if you have any concerns or you'd like to see more, please feel free to reach out to us. We provide tools, services, and training on Primavera products. And this is just one of the tools that we have in our toolkit. We have a number of other tools available to work with P6 as well. So go on our website, take a look. You can see all the different tools and add-ons that we have for P6. Okay, I'm going to open it up to questions. I see I've got a couple questions already. So if you have a question, put it in either the chat or the questions section, preferably the questions section, and we'll make sure we get it answered. So we did have a question during the presentation saying, can we do inter-project relationships? Absolutely, you can. We have a number of clients who do that because they get updates from a subcontractor or from somebody outside the organization, and they want to incorporate that into a master schedule. So what you can do is you can extract the relationships, you can filter out just the cross-project relationships, and then use those to reassign to the new project that comes in. And that's a standard use case for P6 in that environment, or for P6-Loader in that environment. We have another question here. How much does it cost? Well, if you'd like to reach out to us, we're happy to provide you with costing on it. We actually have different sizes of P6-Loader. We have a very basic package for people who are working by themselves, all the way up to corporate packages where you have hundreds of users or hundreds of projects. Are there any other questions at this point? We're just about out of time, or we are out of time, but if you have any other questions, put them in the chat and we'll get them answered. You can also reach out to us. Here's our contact information. So there's a question here, does P6-Loader work with the standalone version? It does work with the standalone version as long as you're not running on the SQLite database, because Oracle doesn't set up web services or API to work with SQLite. If you're running on MS SQL or Oracle XE on your standalone, it will work. So again, if you are running on the SQLite version, it's not a problem with P6-Loader, it's a problem just Oracle didn't figure people are going to use the API with that, so they never enabled it. But we can actually upgrade you to Oracle XE at no cost. And if you're set up that way, then you can use P6-Loader. Okay, again, Sue's contact information is here. She's the expert on P6-Loader. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to her. You can call her or send her an email. There's also lots of information on our website about P6-Loader, as well as a number of videos on different use cases and that sort of thing. Some great resources there. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and stay safe, have a good day, and we hope to hear from you. Thank you.